طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Continuing along with our kitab Ad-Da' wa Dawa' by Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, the sickness and the cure. So today he's going to start kind of a new section dealing with the uqubat al-shar'iyya, or the hudud, like the Islamic legislative punishments. So the first part we talked about some of the spiritual cures, like the Quran and the dua and the belief in qadr, and then he got into like some of the punishments of the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can send down for the effects of sin, right? And he went through a whole bunch in different ones. So now he's getting into a new chapter talking about the actual Islamic legislated punishment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةُ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, that you have in like the compensation for the punishments, life, O you who have intellect. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his legislation, in the Sharia, establishing it, there's life for the ummah. We mentioned before also that the Sharia came to protect 5 main things: the deen, the aql, the nafs, the ard, and the mal. The religion, the freedom to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the aql, your mind, the nafs, the life, the ard, your honor or your nasl, your offspring, your progeny, and al-mal, the wealth. This is what the main 5 points of the Sharia has come to protect, right? And so therefore it's legislated certain punishments for those who violate those laws or those things that are supposed to be protected. So the Imam, he starts, فَإِن لَمْ تُرَدَّعَكَ هَذِهِ الْعُقُوبَاتِ وَلَمْ تَجِدْ لَهَا تَأْثِيرًا فِي قَلْبِكَ فَاحْذَرْهُ العقوبات الشرعية التي شرعها الله ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم على الجرائم. So continuing from all the stuff he's mentioned before, from the different types of punishments, from the dunya, from the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how the angels will go away from you, you lose the protection from Allah, you lose honor, even earthquakes and hardships and all these type of effects come from the sins that people do. He said if that didn't scare you enough, then maybe the punishments that are prescribed for doing some of these haram things will scare you. Right? Some of the violations of the Quran and the Sunnah are prescribed certain punishments. كما قطع اليد في سرقة 3 دراهم, as the hand is cut for 3 dirhams. وقطع اليد والرجل في قطع الطريق أو في قطع الطرق على معصوم المال والنفس. And also how those, like the bandits that raid the highways, highway robbers and stuff like that attack people, that's legislated to have their hand and their foot cut off from both sides. And then he talks about the punishments for sexual crimes. And and then the punishment for killing the innocent souls, all these different types of punishments he's going to go through in detail. But one must recall too, like we're living in a time where the Sharia is being, challenged and, saying that it's backwards. But in reality, when it was established, there was justice in society. There was peace. People had felt comfortable with leaving their possessions that would be protected. People felt comfortable with their lives. So when the Sharia was left, a lot of sicknesses came to society actually. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said that for any successful civilization or any successful society to be established, there must be 2 requirements. He said, Kitabun yahdi wa sayfun yahmi, a book that will guide and a sword that will protect. Right? And if you study the great civilizations in history, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the Persian Empire, even like the United States, they all have something in common in terms of having a legislative constitution, like laws that to be followed, and they have strong military to protect and to enforce those laws, right? So if you're missing any one of those 2, the civilization cannot be successful. If it depends solely on the military, it'll eventually die out, because people need more than just wars and fighting. And if it has a nice legislation, a nice book, nice laws, but nothing to enforce it, then people will go astray. They won't bother to follow these laws. So those two requirements are required in any type of government, any type of civilization, right? And people have the right to choose their form of government. So in Islamic societies, this, like, I'm going to just give a disclaimer, what we're talking about is in the Islamic societies establishing the Sharia, right? It's not for anybody living in the West to go and try to establish Sharia upon somebody or do this type of punishments. That's not the case. Even in many Muslim countries, unfortunately, they're not ruling by the Sharia, and it's even in those countries it's not permissible to do that. To enforce the hudud, you have to have an Islamic government, and you have to have an Islamic court, right? And it's very stringent. Like, the people will say that you do this and you do that, but if you look in Islamic history, for example, the big deal is the death penalty for adultery, right? It's never been established, from what I know in the great history that we have for over 1,000 years, that it was established by 4 witnesses. It's always been established by a person going to the court and admitting their sin, and they're wanting to have their head upon them so it will relieve their sin from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But it's never been 4 people to actually witness. It's very, very stringent rules for any of these type of punishments to be established, right? But if those rules are met and the punishment is proved beyond a reasonable doubt, then there is laws to enforce. Just like in any country, in any civilization, if you break the law, there is punishment for it. Here, for example, they will put people away for hundreds of years in prison. They die in prison, which is sometimes worse. Some people that I've met personally say that they'd rather have one of the hudud than to stay all this time in prison. And also for people that commit murder or do heinous crimes, they also have capital punishment here, right? But this is just a background, inshallah, so to bear this in mind, that the establishment of the Sharia is one of the purposes to protect those 5 principles we talked about. Islam is a complete way of life. It's a form of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all the different affairs, whether it be economic, whether it be marital, whether it be raising your kids, whether it be ruling in a government, right? We have the mindset that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala huwa al-hakim. He is the ruler, the Lord, the creator. He knows us better than ourselves. He knows what's good for us. So if He legislates something for us, it's for our own benefit and our own good, right? That's what the Sharia should be established for justice and to protect the people and to protect the societies. Once it was abandoned, then you see all types of problems in our ummah. So, uqubat al-dhunub al-shar'iyya wa qadariyya. So he's saying that the punishments are of 2 kinds, shar'iyya wa qadariyya. We discussed mostly the qadariyya, which is the decree from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like not a direct punishment that you're established in front of an Islamic court, but other punishments that Allah can send to a person, whether it be in the dunya or it's in the akhirah. فإذا أقيمت الشرعية رفعت العقوبة القدرية أو أخفتها. So if the Shar'i punishment is established, that will take away the person's qadari punishment, right? Allah is not going to punish you twice for the same sin. And many scholars say that if the had is established upon a person, that wipes away the sin, khalas, right? Or it will decrease the punishment. Sometimes the sin might be even greater than the actual prescribed punishment, so it might be some room left for the uquba al-qadariyah. ولا يكاد الرب تعالى يجمع على عبدي بين العقوبتين إلا إذا لم يفي أحدهما برفع موجب الذنب. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He won't combine 2 punishments for a person unless one of the punishments was not sufficient to lift away the sins. ولم يكفي في زوال دائه, and it was not enough to cure the sickness. وإذا عتلت عقوبات الشرعية استحالت القدرية وربما كانت أشد من الشرعية. And if the Sharia punishment was not established, then the Qadri might take its place, and the Qadri punishment might be even greater than the Shari punishment. وربما كانت دونها, and it could be less than it. ولكنها تعم والشرعية تخص فإن الرب تبارك وتعالى لا يعاقب شرعا إلا من باشر الجناية أو تسبب إليها. So the Qadri punishment the divine decree that's not like the legislated one, it's like a general punishment that will come upon a people or a person. And the shar'i is a specific punishment. You know, if a person gets caught drinking wine and there's witnesses, there's a specific punishment, like a lashes, for example. Or if a person steals a certain amount, you know, and the proof of theft is established, then that becomes qat' al-yad. Yes.
Just a quick question. Are you distinguishing between hudud and ta'zirat?
We're going to get into that as well. So the brothers are asking, the hudud is the legislated punishment that's established in the Quran and the Sunnah. Clearly, like if you do such and such, the punishment is this. And ta'zir is something that's not clear in the Quran and Sunnah. So the judges have authority to make it a punishment. It could be like jail time, it could be lashes, it could be up to even killing, you know, like death penalty, if it's something that's caused such harm upon the ummah. But he will get into that as well, inshallah. وأما العقوبة القدرية فإنها تقع عامة وخاصة فإن المعصية إذا خفيت لم تضر إلا صاحبها وإذا أعلنت ضر الخاصة والعامة. So he's saying that the qadari punishment could be specific to that person or it could be general. So if a person does a sin, it's just between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't go out into the public, then Allah can just give the qadari punishment for that person alone. However, if the sin was done out in the open in front of society and nobody forbid it and nobody said something bad that it's not right or nobody hated it in their heart, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He might send the qadari punishment upon the whole town or upon the family of the person, for example. وقد تقدم أن العقوبة الشرعية شرعها الله سبحانه وتعالى على قدر مفسدة الذنب وتقاضي الطبع لها. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has legislated the certain punishments in accordance to the level of the sinfulness. وجعل الله سبحانه وتعالى ثلاثة أنواع القتل والقطع والجلد. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's made it three types of punishment. So if you look through the legislative process in the Sharia, there's three types of major punishments, or the hudud. The first one is death penalty. The second one is the cutting, whether it be cutting the hand for stealing or cutting the hand and the foot for muharaba, like fighting against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the messenger, or causing highway robbery or banditry and stuff like that. And the jald, which is lashes. وجمع أو جعل القطع بإزاء الكفر وما يليها ويقرب منه وهو الزنا واللواط فإن هذا يفسد الأديان وهذا يفسد الأنساب وهذا يفسد نوع الإنسان. So he's saying, basically he's putting like each one into relation, how the theft is like a corruption of the society, and it's causing a lack of moral in society, right? And it's stealing from other people's property, and it's increasing, it's taking from somebody's rights. And therefore to match that is the cutting. And after that it's like sexual crimes, that's something that corrupts the people themselves, the individuals. And the other one is the one that corrupts the adyan, the religion. So for these three types of corruptions, there is a specific punishment for each one. وقال الإمام أحمد رحمه الله لا أعلم بعد القتل ذنبا أعظم من الزنا. He said that Imam Ahmed, that he doesn't know of a sin that is greater after murder than zina, adultery. واحتج بحديث عبد الله ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه أنه قال يا رسول الله أي ذنب أعظم؟ قال أن تجعل الله ندا وهو خلقك. قال ثم أي؟ قال أن تقتل ولدك مخافة أن يطعم معك. قال ثم أي؟ قال أن تزاني بحلية جارك. So Imam Ahmed, to showing the levels of sins, saying how he doesn't know there's a sin greater than murder, or a sin as great after murder than adultery. And he used this hadith saying the Prophet ﷺ was asked by Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, what is the greatest of sins? And he said to commit shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He is the one who created you. Like to give a partner to Allah, that's the greatest of all sins. Allah gave you your life, He gave you your family, He gave you your wealth, He gave you your health, everything you have is because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you go and worship something else. So that's the greatest sin ala itlaq. That's a sin that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forgive. Right? Disbelief in Him or associating partners to Him. Then he said, what after that? He said that you should kill your child out of fear of poverty. And then he said, after that, what is the greatest of sins? And he said, to have adultery with your neighbor's wife. And then he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayat after this, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَدْعُونَ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ وَلَا يَقْتُلُونَ النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ وَلَا يَزْنُونَ. Allah confirming this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, talking about those who are forgiven and those who are the righteous, they don't call upon other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't kill the innocent soul, and they don't commit adultery. والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ذكر من كل نوع أعلاها ليطابق جوابه السؤال السائل. So these three types of crimes, the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned the worst of each one of them, right? So the worst crime is shirk, associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the greatest form of kufr. And then the second, the greatest form of murder is to kill your own child out of fear of poverty. And then the third is to have adultery with your neighbor's wife, right? So all three of those in general, like shirk, qatl, and zina, are haram. But the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba was asking what's the greatest of haram. So Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, he's saying the Prophet mentioned the worst of those three things. فَأَعْظَمَ أَنْوَعَ الشِّرْكِ أَنْ يَجْعَلَ الْعَبْدُ لِلَّهِ نَدًّا. So the greatest type of shirk is to put a partner to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You guys know there's different types of shirk. There's shirk al-khafi, and then shirk al-asghar, and shirk al-akbar. So committing shirk like with riya, showing off for other people, is a form of shirk, but it's not at the level of associating partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why the Prophet, he mentioned the highest form of shirk, the worst form of shirk. The second one, he said, وَعَدَمْ أَنْوَاعَ الْقَتْلِ أَنْ يَقْتَلْ وَلَدَهُ خَشْيَةَ أَنْ يُشَارِكَهُ فِي طَعَامِهِ وَشَرَابِهِ. That a person kills his own child because he's so stingy or so fearful that the child will eat and drink with him. That's the worst form of murder. وَعَدَمْ أَنْوَاعَ الزِّنَا أَنْ يَزْنِي بِحَلِيَّةِ جَارِهِ فإن مفسد الزنا بتضاعف ما انتهكه من الحق. And the worst form of zina is to a person to commit adultery with their neighbor's wife. And he said that the greatness of the sin of zina, adultery, fornication, increases with the greatness of how you're doing it for. فالزنا بالمرأة التي لها زوج أعظم إثما وعقوبة من التي لا زوج لها. So committing fornication or zina, adultery with fornication with a woman that has a husband is far greater than committing zina with a woman that doesn't have a husband. إذا فيه انتهاك حرمة الزواج وإفساد فراشه وتعليق نسبه عليه. Because having adultery with a married woman leads to corrupting or also destroying the rights of the husband and corrupting his home, basically. Like putting in it that which is not from it. The woman can get pregnant from somebody else, and the husband will think that's his child and be deceived for his whole life, right? So that's the crime of having adultery with the married woman is greater than the crime of having adultery with or having fornication with a non-married woman. And then he goes further in saying having adultery with the neighbor's wife is even greater than that, because the neighbor has not only a right upon you as your fellow human being, as a husband of the woman, but also he's your neighbor. And the Prophet ﷺ has told us that the neighbor has great rights upon us. So that's the worst form of zina. And he said, فَالزِّنَا بِمِيَةٍ امْرَأَةٍ لَا زَوْجَ لَهَا أَيْسَرَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ زِنَا بِإِمْرَأَةٍ الْجَارِ. He's saying that like having a person having illicit relationship with 100 women is better than, they're both obviously evil. It's not good to do it at all, obviously. But he's saying it's less in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than to do it with a married woman one time. وقد ثبت عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يدخل الجنة من لا يأمن جاره بوائقه. So the Prophet said, no one will enter into, or the person will not enter into paradise whose neighbor is not safe from his evil, right? So that's a general hadith, and the Imam is pointing to it, saying that what worse evil is it as a person to commit adultery with his own neighbor's wife, right? That's like, if you get punished, you won't enter Jannah for just being mean to your neighbor or doing evil to your neighbor. What worse evil can you do than that? Then the Imam, he goes into more detail about that, and he talks about the aqsam al-dhunub, like the different categories of sins. إنه سبحانه جعل الذنوب ثلاثة أقسام. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the dhunub, the sins, into three main categories. قسما فيه الحد فهذا لم يشرع فيه كفارة اكتفاء بالحد. So the first category is the sins that have a had, a prescribed punishment for it, right? There's no kafara for that. If the had is established in an Islamic court, in Islamic Sharia, the had has to be established. It has to go forward, right? There's nothing else a person can do besides going forward with that. If, like in Islam, it's better to cover yourself, right? It's better not to turn yourself in. Like, if Allah has covered you, don't expose yourself. Make tawbah between you and Allah. Have a true tawbah, and let the sins be burned away, inshallah, with your tawbah. The Prophet ﷺ, the woman, she came to him, and she said, "O Prophet, I have committed adultery. I would like you to stone me, like to establish the had upon me." And he turned away from her, like he didn't listen. And she came and she said it again, and the third time. And then he's still trying to not listen. He doesn't want to listen. And then she said, because she wanted to make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she just didn't want to take the chance of, having any sin in front of Allah. So she wanted to get, Islamic punishment. But the Prophet, at first, the best is what the Prophet did at first, which is turn away. Like, you don't want to expose yourself. But she insisted, and then he asked her, "Are you mentally stable? Are you okay? Are you sane?" And she said, "Yes." And she said, "Are you sure you're," basically trying to find any excuse he can for her. And she kept insisting. So he was going, she was pregnant, so he said, "We cannot do it until you have the baby." And then, she went and she had the baby. She still came to the Prophet. The Prophet didn't pursue her. She came back to the Prophet and said, "I had my baby, now you can do." He said, "No, mercy for the baby. Feed until the baby can feed on its own, breastfeed the baby." So she went and she breastfed the baby. And then she came back, after the time of breastfeeding and said, "Okay, my baby," she showed him he can eat by himself now, right? So, and then finally he did the had, right? And he said, قَالَ تَابَتْ تَوْبَةً لو وزعت على في رواية أهل الأرض أو أهل المدينة لكفتهم. That she made a sincere tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if it was spread through some narrations to the whole earth, it would have been sufficient for them. Or to all the people of Medina, it would be sufficient for them. She made a pure tawbah, right? And it cleared her. But the point anyways in general was that at first the Prophet ﷺ tried to turn away, because it's better for you if you do a sin to make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala between you and Allah. Don't expose yourself. If Allah covered you, cover yourself and hope for His mercy. His mercy is greater than we can ever imagine, right? He's the one who can give you forgiveness. He's the one who legislated the punishment, but He can, if you turn to Him sincerely, He can forgive you and wipe away the punishment. So that's the first one. There is a had. الثاني وقسم لم يرتب عليه حد فشرع فيه الكفارة. And the second one is that there is no prescribed punishment for it, but there's a kafara for it. Like if you do something, you can do a kafara to make it up. كالوطء في النهار رمضان أو الوطء في الإحرام أو الظهار أو قتل الخطأ. For example, having a relationship in the day of Ramadan, there's a kafara for that. It's with your wife, so it's not haram. You're not going to have the had, but there's a kafara. You'd have to fast 2 months, or feed 60 poor people. Or if a person does it while they're in a state of ihram, doing hajj, there's also a kafara for that. Or if a person kills somebody by accident, if he hits, la qadar, may Allah prevent it, you hit somebody with a car and the person ends up dying, there's a kafara for that. You have to pay the blood money for his body, for his death. So, but this is not hudud, it's different from hudud. And then the third category is there is no had and there's no kafara. وهو نوعان أحدهما ما كان عنه تبعيا كأكل العذرة والشرب البول والدم. So there's one, it's like there's no punishment for it in terms of the hudud, and there's no kafara for it, but something like just unnatural, yani disgusting wise. Like for example, he says that a person who eats, feces or drinks blood or urine or something like that, that's something disgusting, and there's probably punishment for it, like ukhrawiyah, but there's no prescribed head for it.
Was eating pork or something like that as well?
It could be. It's not mentioned here, but I assume it could be similar. But yeah, there's no prescribed. Dam, yeah, khabith.
Is there like a punishment for like shirk and khabith or no?
Had, no.
Not for, okay.
Yeah, only if a person does ridda in an Islamic state, if a person openly declares that he's gone outside the folds of Islam, then there's a prescribed one for that. But if, for like shirk al-khafi or riya, it's different, because that's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like showing off or doing, it's affairs of the heart, and nobody can really judge that. That's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he never established the punishment upon the munafiqeen in Medina. Even though they were disbelievers and they didn't believe in the Prophet or in Allah, and they caused so much harm for the Muslims, but he didn't ever punish them because outwardly they were Muslims. So that's something between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if a person openly does it, he brings the idol in the middle of a city and he starts worshipping and calling others to worshipping it, then yeah, that's obviously, there could be like, if he did ridda, there's a specific punishment for that. Or if he's calling people to evilness, it could be ta'zir, which is the judge, he can establish a punishment for that.
Is that just for idolaters, or is that for anyone outside the fold of Islam?
What do you mean outside? Like if somebody...
If in that scenario, a Christian person were to come and say, hey, I want to bring you guys, and he's openly worshipping his religion and calling people to Christianity.
No, this is for Muslims trying to do that. Like a person claims that he's Muslim, then he changes and does this. But
he changes to anything.
Yeah,
Okay.
but for Christians or Jews and others, some say that they can rule by their own sharia according to their own laws, as long as they respect the laws of the Muslims while they're living there.
Isn't there a distinction between the murtad that openly calls people to away from Islam, and the murtad that doesn't call people, in terms of the hudud?
In terms of hudud, I don't know. There's a difference about the hudud itself upon the person does ridda. There's some say, is that like a fixed had, or is it ta'zir? So does the judge have leeway in it or not? Yeah, but that's like a whole... He might get into it as well, inshallah.
Just the general rule, tudrab shubuhat.
Yeah.
If you're not sure that someone did something, then you don't... which is similar to like the reasonable doubt.
Yeah, reasonable doubt. Yeah. If a person has like, the establishment of the had is very like high standard, so you have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's way harder to get convicted of Islamic punishment than it is to, get convicted here. Unfortunately, sometimes, for example, there's no such thing as conspiracies. Like you can never be have a had for something that somebody intended to do or planned to do but never really did it, right? It has to be a physical act that's been done and committed out in the open, and there's witnesses and there's other evidences. Then there's like intifa and mawani'. The person can't be ignorant. The person has knowledge of what he's doing. All these type of rules and stuff, and it's something people they study for years and years and years before they go to judgeship. So.
Does he also have to admit? So if he doesn't admit, that counts as doubt.
If there's shuhud, it doesn't. If somebody like robbed the bank with and like 10 people witnessed him robbing the bank, and then he says no, I didn't do it, then the shuhud take precedence over his. Yeah, the modern technology in terms of cameras and DNA and other types of evidences now are being considered as qara'in. So I don't know personally if it can be accepted to establish the had 100%, or it has to be with other evidence. But it's considered now as a form of evidence along with the other Islamic evidences, right? And Allah knows best, And then there's there's three categories. The one there's a had, the one there's a kafara, and the one there's no had or kafara. And he said there's one that's like unnatural, disgusting stuff that we like mentioning, and there's one that's natural but it's wrong, there was no head for it. For example, he mentions looking at things that you're not supposed to be looking at, or touching what things you're not supposed to be touching, or kissing, for example, these type of things. There's not a specific head for it, but obviously it's a type of wrongfulness that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. And the kafaraat, the ways to expiate the sins are 3 as well. أحدها ما كان مباحا الأصل ثم عرض تحريمه فباشر في الحالة التي عرض فيها التحريم كالوطء في الإحرام والصيام. The thing that there was, like, the original act is halal, mubah, but because of a specific instance it became haram. For example, having sexual intercourse during your fasting during Ramadan, with your wife before, outside the time of fasting, it's permissible, it's mubah, but for a specific time period, a specific reason, it became forbidden, right? So there's a specific kafara for that. The second one, the person who swears an oath, right? If you swear an oath intentionally and you break that oath, you have a kafara, either to free a slave person, or to feed or clothe 10 poor people, or to fast 3 days, in that order. And the third one, something that you have to, it happens unintentionally, and you have to make up for it, even though it was unintentional. And that we said, like, for example, manslaughter, killing a person unintentionally with a car, or maybe putting something wrong in the food. He was allergic to something by accident and the person died as a result of your hands, then there's a kafara for that as well, right? So these are the 3 types of kafara. And then the Imam, he goes into the discussion of how you cannot combine the had and ta'zir. So had, we said, is a specific punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's legislated in the Quran or in the Sunnah, and the ta'zir is that's left up to the judge. So if a person does something that's not clearly prescribed to take care of in the Quran or the Sunnah, right, the judge has some leeway, ijtihad of the judge, to prescribe punishment for him. For he may mention some examples. So he said, ولا يجتمع الحد والتعزير في معصية بل إن كان فيها حد اكتفى به وإلا اكتفى بالتعزير. So no way that you can combine the had and the ta'zir in one type of wrongdoing. If it's a had punishment, the had is sufficient. That's enough. You can't go overboard and do something above the had. And if it's not a had punishment, then the ta'zir is the sufficient for it. And also, ولا يجتمع الحد والكفارة في المعصية. Also, you cannot have the had, the prescribed punishment, and kafara in the same sin, right? So it's one or the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful, and He's not going to put a burden upon a soul that it cannot bear. So in His mercy, if you do one thing that makes up for that sin, then khalas, that's it. Either it be the had, it takes care of it. If it's ta'zir, it takes care of it. If it's kafara, it takes care of it.
But going back on the whole shirk issue.
On the what?
The
Shirk.
So, like, we know that shirk is like you can't forgive for shirk, right? But what if someone leaves the fold of Islam, realizes he screws up, goes back to the fold of Islam? Like, is he still forgiven for that time period where he left?
Yeah, if you make tawbah, no matter what you do, even if it's shirk, Allah will forgive you. And actually He'll turn your bad deeds into good deeds. So, like the Sahaba, they were mushrikeen, but they became Muslim. And there is a story, I think, of one who left the folds of Islam and he came back to Islam. And also, like, for example, tarak as-salat, the one who leaves the salat. There's some say it's had, some say it's ta'zir. There's a punishment for that, some scholars say. It's a difference of opinion. So some say, because tarak as-salat, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-ahdu baynana wa baynahum as-salat, faman tarakaha faqad kafar." That the contract between us and them, or the difference between us and them, the non-believers, is a salat. So whoever leaves it has committed kufr. So some scholars says it's kufr akbar, yukhraj min al-millah, and some say, the majority say no, it's just a great sin, but he's still a Muslim. And some say no, if he leaves the salat completely, he's not a Muslim. And so therefore they established the had for that, which is the death penalty. And the others say no, he should be given a chance to. All of them give him, I think, 3 days to make tawbah and to come back to it. And some say he just kept in prison indefinitely. Some say he's, the death penalty is established. But same thing with ridda. If a person became a non-Muslim and he came back to Islam, inshallah will be accepted from him tawbah. But there are certain acts that take a person outside the folds of Islam, and even though he makes tawbah, the had still has to be established. For example, if he curses the Prophet ﷺ in an Islamic society, Islamic state, then the scholars have said the had for that is khalas, death penalty, because it's a sin that's so great. Even if the person makes tawbah, but you've transgressed upon the right of the Prophet ﷺ, and he's not there even to, defend himself, and he's done so much for the ummah. So if you've transgressed the rights, in that sense, they have specific punishment for that. So, but in general, if you make tawbah and if you correct your ways, then it's accepted.
So, quick question. The saying that al-Islam yajubu ma qablahu, al-tawbah tajubu ma qablaha, wal-hajj yajubu ma qablah. Does these three, do they also forgive the major sins? Because for hajj, I know that it's raja min hajji kayam waladatu ummah. So does that mean that it also forgives the major sins as well that were committed before hajj?
For the Islam and the tawbah, yes. For the hajj, the apparent of the text is that it does, but some scholars say that if he's done a sin that requires tawbah, the tawbah is still required. Like the hajj is not sufficient for his covering. So for example, if a person committed, Allah protect us from that, a murder, and then he went and made hajj, but he didn't make tawbah from the murder, the hajj will not cover for that sin. He has to make tawbah. So it's a deep subject kind of now, so we'll pause here. It gets into a little bit more detail. After that, he's going to go a little bit more into the prescribed punishments, and then he'll start getting into like the cures of the sicknesses, which is the khatam of the book, inshallah. So if you have any more questions now, tafaddalu.
So since we don't live in a society that is Islamic, I'm assuming that really all we can do is make tawbah for any horror and say that we've committed it, right?
Yeah, so again, iqamat al-had al-hudud is only in an Islamic country where the Sharia is established, right? And it has to go through lots of different requirements before it's established. You can't do that in non-Muslim countries, or even in most Muslim countries that are not ruling by Islam. And even in a Muslim country that's ruling by Islam, that Sharia is there, you cannot take it upon your own hands to go and establish the hudud. If a person does that in an Islamic country, he can have the punishment upon himself, because he's going outside his authority, basically, right? So especially in a non-Muslim country, obviously you have to respect the laws of the land that you live in, and you have the door of tawbah, and nasiha. So if you see somebody doing something that's very bad, give him advice, encourage him to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or her. If it's yourself, keep making tawbah, don't give up. Always turn to Allah, He's the most merciful, right? Eventually, inshallah, you can stop it and go back to Allah and live a good life, and inshallah Allah will cover your sins.
So, كل أمتي معافى إلا المجاهدين. You mentioned earlier.
Yes.
So we'll cover a person by night, and he goes and exposes himself by day.
Yeah.
That's the only person that's not going to be.
Yeah, it's the one that he's mentioning in the hadith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has covered his faults, right? And he goes and exposes himself. So that way his sin will be taken into account on the day of judgment. Allah said that, I covered you and you went and exposed yourself, so now you will take the punishment. So yeah, and some of the worst is the ones that boast about sin. We talked about in the previous chapters, the punishment of those that brag about doing sinfulness, subhanAllah. And now unfortunately in our society, in the modern times, it's become popular to brag about sinfulness. Like you find all these videos online, these websites, these people openly doing ma'asiyah and bragging about it, laughing about it. People having relationships with women and going and talking about it to everybody and bragging about it. And even in Western societies, these type of behaviors were looked down upon and forbidden in Western societies. Now it's become like leaders of countries are getting exposed. Leaders of industry are getting exposed, with some of the worst type of behaviors, right? And there's no shyness for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no shyness, respect for the deen of Islam or their own religion. And in fact, when you go back and look in their books, it's become now the religion is seen as a backwards thing, and ibahiyya and doing everything under the sun is something that's good and encouraged in society. So us Muslims especially, we have to be very careful not to get influenced by these type of ideologies. And we talked in detail about how we have to be on guard with our hearts and our ears and our tongues and our minds and our eyesight. We'll be careful what we look at, careful what you listen to, careful what you talk about. Be on guard, protect your heart. When the Dajjal comes, it seems like, subhanAllah, everything is moving to that direction, like it's preparing for the Dajjal to come. Like it's getting people ready to follow the Dajjal, if you look about it. And the Prophet, he told us, he warned us, he said the biggest fitna that will ever come to the earth is the Dajjal, right? So how many of us are prepared for that? We have to be on guard and extra careful with what we let into our hearts, and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Him to protect our hearts and protect our minds and protect our souls.
The person who abandons prayer, you said earlier that there are two opinions. There are those the scholars who say they are not, or hadith that says, Prophet Muhammad said they're not one of us. That person is not one of us, meaning they're not Muslim. And then there are some that are a little bit lenient. But then, when he says the person who abandons Salah cut the ties with Allah, doesn't that strengthen the belief of, or the opinion of, that person is not Muslim? If you cut the ties with Allah, are you Muslim?
There is strong evidence for that, even though it's a minority opinion. So basically, the Hanabila, they see it as a person going outside the folds of Islam.
The person who doesn't pray at all.
The person that abandons the prayer. Some of them, Dhahiri and some of the Hanabila, went to the point that even if a person intentionally leaves one salah, he's gone outside the folds of Islam, he has to make tawbah and come back to Islam. But in general, the majority opinion for that madhab is if they leave salah completely, they don't do any salah, then they have gone outside the folds of Islam. They get divorced from their wives if they're married to a Muslimah. They don't get inheritance from their family. They don't inherit their kids. They don't get buried with the Muslims. So it's very, very dangerous. It's a minority. That's the one. The Maliki and Shafi'i and Hanafiya, they say no, he's still a Muslim, but he's doing a very grave sin. Because after the Shahada, the greatest deed you can do is the Salat. And like you said, the word Salat comes from Sila. That's your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you cut that connection, you're cutting your relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's very dangerous. Even like a person intentionally delaying the Salah. The Prophet ﷺ, he gave the example of a person delaying Salat al-Asr, making it. He's saying it's like you lost your family, you lost your wealth, you lost all your possessions, you lost everything you have. So if a person can imagine one day they get a phone call saying your house burned down, all your relatives are dead, all your wealth is gone, you've lost everything, or there's an earthquake and you lost everything, how would you feel? So sad and disappointed. He said to make the Asr late on purpose is worse than that. And we said before that rak'atay al-fajr khayru min ad-dunya wa ma fiha. 2 rak'ahs of Fajr is better than the dunya and everything in it. That's a sunnah salat. So imagine the faridah, the fard, right? So salat is very important. And the Prophet ﷺ, there's so many ahadith. If you have a river outside your home and you go and wash in it 5 times a day, will any filth be left upon you? The Sahaba said, no, of course not. He said, that's the salat. If you establish the salat 5 times a day, it's like you clean yourself. You might fall, you might stumble, you might do something wrong, but then you go back, you go and bow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and pray, and then you get revived. Your soul gets revived. So salat is very important. It is one of the most important arkan of Islam. And the ayah says, when the people were in the hellfire asked, مَا سَلَكَكُمْ فِي سَقَرٍ قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُمْ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. What put you in this hellfire? What put you in this punishment? They said, we are not of those who established the prayers. They didn't just say we didn't pray, they said we didn't do prayers regularly. Right? وَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. Cursed be those people who pray. Right? Or some scholars say it's a valley in the hellfire. Wail. For those who pray, لكن عن صلاتهم ساهون, but they're negligent, they do it late, or they're not concentrating in salat. You know. So, نسأل الله العافية, it's a very important issue for us to establish the prayer, encourage others to establish the prayer.
And the example that you brought with the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the woman that came to her asking for the had punishment, isn't like, wouldn't that also be like taken as like sort of like a rahmah we should also have with people in regards to like if someone was accused of something, even in a non-Islamic society, right? Like even, like aren't we supposed to have also benefit of the doubt for a lot of things? Like even like in Islamic society, like there's like 100, like not 100, but like I'm just like exaggerating, like, but there is excuses for someone. Like if he was poor, like the had punishment wouldn't be upon him because he needed to survive or something like that. Like there's like aren't there like layers upon layers of like, you know, excuses before like a had punishment could be like implemented?
Yeah, there's always excuses. Only if it's got lifted to the judge and he hears the evidence and he has the witnesses, then it becomes like he has to do it. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, لو كانت فاطمة بنت رسول you know, صدقت لقطعت يدها. So even my own daughter, if she stole, then I would have to cut her hand. If it comes to the qadi, to the hakim, then he has to establish the had, because it's become open now. So to enforce the rules in society, because if he lets that person go free, get away with it, it will become like more widespread in society. So that's why the had is established in general, that, you know, maybe one person has it to protect thousands of people, you know, from the evil to appear. But especially like in general in Islam, you always find excuses for your brothers and sisters. And if they do something, you see them doing something wrong, advise them, make dua for them, don't expose them. Because the one who follows the faults of their brother or their sister, Allah will follow their faults on the Day of Judgment. And the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا كَانَ رِفْقُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا زَانُهُ وَمَا نُزِعَ مِنْهُ إِلَّا شَانُهُ. That gentleness is not in something except that it makes it beautiful. It's not taken away from something except that it makes it ugly. So Muslims, they always have that gentleness, you know, in rifq, in rahmah. Just like you want Allah to have mercy upon you, have mercy upon your brothers and sisters, right? You don't know what they're going through. Think about all the sins that you do before you start judging other people as well. You know, there's many avenues to give advice and to be kind and gentle. And maybe the person doesn't know better. Maybe the person fell, you know, lift him up. Don't step on him, help the shaitan against him or her, right? So hopefully that answers, inshallah. So according to the Hanabila, there's no difference. You know, they will be advised. But according to all scholars, if the person says that salah is not obligatory, even if he prays day and night, he's gone outside the folds of Islam. You know, if you make anything halal haram or anything haram halal, that's legislation with knowledge. You know, then that takes you outside the folds, and that's a form of punishment can be established upon that person. Yeah. So a person who, you know, prayer is like, we'll say a different issue. Well, let's just say wine, for example. You know, he drinks wine and he gets drunk, but he says it's haram, may Allah forgive me, you know, I know it's wrong. So this person is better in the sight of Allah than the person who doesn't touch wine and drink it all and says it's halal. That's a form of shirk and kufr, actually, when you do tahleel al-haram or tahreem al-halal. Yeah. So be careful making hukum about anything. Always be sure you 100% you know that this is clearly halal or haram before you start saying stuff. You know, some people jump to say haram, 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 and they don't even know for sure if it's haram, right? Or it's mubah, it's okay, it's no problem, do it. And they don't have no idea that it's haram. So just in general, we have to be careful about that. We had a whole chapter about that before as well. We mentioned before, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the most merciful. Wasat rahmatu kulli shay, that Allah's mercy is above and great everything, more merciful. You know, like the Prophet ﷺ, he saw the lady who was missing her baby, running frantically around the Medina, trying to find the baby, you know, going crazy, and then she finally found the baby, and she got the baby and suckled it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, do you see this mother, you know, throwing the baby into the fire? And he said, the Sahaba said, of course not. Look how crazy she is looking for her baby, and how close, how she's holding so closely to the baby now. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is more merciful to throw His servant into the fire than this mother is for her baby into the fire. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His mercy is far greater than we can comprehend. But these rules are established, He gives us because He wants good for us, as Muslims. So the hudud are established to wipe away your sins. Or when hardship comes upon you, if you're having a tough time in life, that's a way to wipe away your sins. Or if that's not enough, Allah gives you more hardship. Or you might have, some people have the punishment in the grave. All these things to expiate the sins, so you enter into paradise with a clean heart, a pure heart, and no sins upon you. So you can live forever in peace and joy and harmony, right? That's the reason, that's the mercy of Allah. So when He says there's life in the qisas, it's a reason for that. Life for the soul of the person doing the jarima, and life for society, so the jarima won't be taking place in the society anymore.
I was attending a lecture for Jonathan Brown. Mm-hmm. He was saying that ever since the Prophet's time until the end of the Ottoman Empire, the capital punishment was only done twice. In the Islamic, capital punishment was only ever enforced twice.
For zina?
No, for qisas. Yeah. So I think people are like, oh, Islam is shot by the sword. Islam is a religion of hatred and whatever. That he said it was only enforced twice in 1400 years.
Yeah, I believe people came up and they admitted to it.
Most of the time it was that people admitting to their faults. But in terms of being proved again, Allah, I don't know if it's that little, but it's something. It's not something like, no comparison to the, if you look at the rate of jailing in this country, how many people are in jail?
It's worse than China.
It's worse, than even in the world, the population, but especially here. I think there's 2-point-something million people in jail of a country. How many people is that? So it's far, far, far less for over 1,000 years. Not just even modern times, but from the beginning of Islam until now, the beginning of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam until now.
Isn't there also a hadith about somebody who stole something and they were about to cut his hand, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, wait, let me talk to him. And when he asked him, why did you do it? He said, I was hungry. I stole because I was hungry. He said, let him go.
Yeah, I think that was with Omar radiallahu anhu.
Oh,
I think so, yeah. Because in the time of drought or hunger, then the had of sariqah is lifted because of that situation. Like the person, in Islam it's haram to kill yourself, right? And doing something that will lead to your death is also haram. So if you're starving to death, things become permissible for you that aren't normally permissible. So you can drink wine or eat, pork just to stay alive, So the same thing, a person, he has to steal just to stay alive. And in that sense, the had he's exempted from that. That's why Umar did that at that time there was drought. And also
in general, the sariqah isn't food stuff is not one of, stealing food is not a
yeah, it has to be above a certain amount. They said 3 dirhams, and also it has to be khufyatan, which means in secret, like a person breaks into the house and steals something, or it's like a safe and he breaks in the safe and takes something like that. So it's a different punishment if a person comes openly and just I take that cell phone and just put it in my pocket and walk away right in front of everybody, because that, in a sense, at least he's man enough to go and do it. He will be punished, obviously, but it's not the same as someone doing it sneakily, right? So it's very interesting when you study the Sharia and the specifications of each type of punishment. It's amazing, subhanAllah, and each one befits the crime, and you go and see the explanation behind it, why it just increases your iman. This is a perfect legislated system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows what's best for human beings.
What nation did Allah enforce the law that if you killed one, it's like you killed the whole mankind? So does that coordinate with one person refers to the whole in that sense?
No, the ayah means in general that killing one single innocent soul is like killing all of humanity. It's just to show the evilness of the jarima. But in terms as it relates to yourself, the only, you can't I don't see how you can't like I said, you have to go before the judge in Islamic state to have the head. Like you can't cut your own hand off
No,
or
that's
something
not
like
what
that.
I mean, but
Okay.
in the spiritual sense.
In the spiritual sense, you make tawbah. That's the cure for the sickness and the evilness that you've done sins for. You make up by tawbah. You make up by doing extra good deeds, right? You learn to, for example, if a person's, stole, may Allah protect us from that, you go and return that right to that person. Or you go and give extra sadaqah. Try to be fitting with that, you fear falling into fornication or haram, then you go and do the halal, which is the marriage, right? And that's what we've been discussing anyway the whole time, basically, that the different avenues a person can do to stay away from the haram and do the halal,
Yes,
basically.
because, we are physical beings. We can't. There's a spiritual side, but for most of us, we don't know how to even identify our spiritual side. So how do you even have a feel of that spiritual side to cleanse it or to practice the rules?
I think everybody has if you're a Muslim and you're a mu'min, you have some iman, then you're going to have identify with the spiritual side in the sense. Like you'll feel your conscience will feel something when you're doing wrong. Like if you have that, we talked earlier, if a person gets so deep into sins that his own conscience, his own self loses the concept of right and wrong, then he's gone. His heart is sealed. That's different. But in general, the Muslims, like if you're worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you still have that in your conscience to, feel that you're doing something wrong, so you can stop it and make tawbah, right? And then part of the series of this class is showing us how to think about these consequences to prevent us from falling into sin in the first place. Like the last lecture we had was about the malaika, the angels, just thinking about these honorable creatures around you and having some shyness from falling into the sin. Or thinking about what's to come in the akhirah, or the thinking about, the evil effects it has upon your heart. All these type of things are cures that can prevent you from doing sin, falling sin. If you fall into the sin, the best cure is to make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and repent. And doing good deeds. The more good deeds you do, the harder it is for you to sin. And the closer you get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you're under the protection of Allah, then, we talked about the hadith. He becomes the sight with which you see, the hearing with which you hear, the steps with which you take. All these things Allah is guiding you with His light, the closer you get to Him. So, we'll stop here if you have any questions after, so that people can go. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallah bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.